Ukraine actually have quite an interesting history filled with pretty heavy tensions. Going back to medieval times, even Poland and Ukraine did not get along very well for centuries. The modern day area of Ukraine was part of Kievan Rus, which was a Slavic state. And as Poland expanded their influence, clashing with this area was quite inevitable. Towards the 16th and 17th centuries, Poland was able to dominate a lot of modern-day Ukraine's land, and this resulted in a Polish nobility and a Ukrainian peasantry. The Ukrainian Cossacks was a rebellion against the Polish nobility, which resulted in a lot of destruction. And this is when some Ukrainians began aligning with Russia. Throughout the next few decades, there is the partition of Poland, where the Poland-Lithuanian Commonwealth becomes under Russia, Prussia, and Austrian control. And at this time, modern-day Ukraine is also under Russian control. As both Poland and Ukraine began their nationalist movements, tensions and arguments over Galicia and other bordering territories began to become strong. So fast forwarding quite a few years to the end of World War I, there is a Polish-Ukrainian war from 1918 to 1919. And that war was fought over eastern Galicia and Volhynia. And by 1921, the Treaty of Riga was signed, ending the war and giving control of these areas to Poland. So Polish rule kept Ukrainian culture suppressed, which created Ukrainian nationalist groups such as the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists. So by the time of World War II, both Poland and Ukraine had been suffering quite a lot in the hands of Soviet and Nazi control. And in 1943 through 1944, Ukrainian nationalists killed tens of thousands of Poles in the eastern Galicia and Volhynia areas when they were trying to wipe out Polish influence and presence in those territories. And after the fall of the USSR, however, where Ukraine was under Soviet control, Ukraine became independent in 1991 and Poland became one of its biggest allies. There have been tensions over the Volhynian massacre and other historical disparities, but Poland and Ukraine have been strong allies for years, especially since the war now. Which brings us to the topic of today's documentary, and it is Poland and the global world throughout the Russia-Ukraine war. So the first big question we're going to be answering today is, how has the war shaped globalization in Poland? And there are two major factors of globalization that have been heavily impacted by the war, and those are energy sources and trade. So historically, Poland has been very dependent on fossil fuels, primarily coal, and a large majority of these fossil fuels have been imported from Russia. As Poland is one of the biggest allies to Ukraine during this war, Poland has decided to cut as much fossil fuel imports from Russia as possible. Poland doesn't want anything to do with Russia at the moment while the war is going on. So if Poland isn't depending on Russia for coal and fossil fuels, that means Poland has to look elsewhere for their energy sources. Two major developments have occurred because of the war in cutting off Russian imports. The first is the switch to solar and wind power. So climate change has been an issue that Poland has been focusing on for a while. As part of the Paris Agreement and after hosting the COP24 in 2018, Poland has proven to be working hard at combating climate change. This means that the past few years there have been efforts to incorporate more solar and wind power where it is possible. But the war and cutting off Russian imports has made this process more important and has rushed it along. As well as solar and wind power, in 2022 there was the Baltic Pipe project where Poland had a pipeline to Norway and Denmark, where they were able to get more fossil fuels from places other than Russia. Both of these projects have been heavily influenced by the war, but they are also reaching their 2030 target of reducing their carbon emissions. It's a win-win, if you will, working less with Russia and getting their carbon emissions lowered and working on reaching their 2030 climate goals. Now, the second factor of globalization in Poland that has been influenced by the Russia-Ukraine war is trade. We can see that Poland is shifting away from trade with Russia, resulting in more trade occurring in Western Europe, Asia, and the Americas. Exports and imports from and into the Americas include computer pieces, machinery, transportation equipment, and other electronic equipment. Trade with Asia, primarily China, but a few other Asian countries as well, include copper, machinery, motor vehicle parts, etc. Although Polish-Asian trade is limited, it has been on the rise recently as Poland is losing a major trading partner, being Russia. And it's important to note, while trade between Poland and Russia is decreasing exponentially, there is still trade between the two countries. And in 2023, according to UN databases, close to 3.71 billion US dollars of Polish exports were sent to Russia. Secondly, we'll be talking about global inequalities in Poland that we've seen throughout the war. So while there are quite a few inequalities that have gotten worse since the war, we only have time to focus on the rise of 4 major inequalities that have been affecting Poles and Ukrainian refugees. First, the rising cost of housing has been a somewhat recent development that has been drastically affected by inflation that the war has caused. This inflation is mainly affecting food, energy, and of course housing. As more refugees are entering the country, the demand for housing is obviously increasing, resulting in a housing shortage and the cost of living to go up. The second inequality that we can see from the war is refugee discrimination. Many Ukrainian refugees are entering Poland and experiencing language barriers. Many often come in with different skill sets and are unable to work in fields similar to what they were working in their home country. As well as language barriers and differing skill sets, there's also a competition for resources that comes with any type of widespread immigration. We've also seen over 6 million refugees entering the country, so these inequalities are inevitable, but they're still very sad. Thirdly, gender inequality is another major issue in Poland right now. Due to the war, the influx of refugees entering Poland are primarily women and children, as the men are more often than not fighting in the war in Ukraine. A huge number of women and children are entering the country, which puts them at risk. With such a huge number of only women and children entering the country, there are many dangerous things that could occur. This increases the possibilities of sex trafficking, human trafficking, and overall just being exploited. These women and children are vulnerable right now, and it is unfortunately very easy for them to be taken advantage of. We can also see informal labor markets and labor exploitation as well. Finally, we have seen some educational inequality in Ukrainian children coming into Poland and how some people have been fighting against this inequality. There are many times a lack of resources available to teachers in order to help with the influx of Ukrainian children entering schools. There's a lack of textbooks for many refugee students. We can also see a divide between Polish students and Ukrainian refugees because of what classes they have been placed in. Many Polish students are with Polish students, and Ukrainian refugees tend to stay with Ukrainian students in the classrooms, whether that's due to language barriers or educational differences. One of my close colleagues has conducted an interview with a Ukrainian refugee mother who has a child in Polish schools to explain some of these experiences. Let's roll that clip.
Thank you for agreeing to this interview today. Can you state the reason you're here?
Yes, I am a Ukrainian refugee and my daughter is in the Polish school system right now.
Thank you. Can you tell me some of the good that has come from your child being in Polish school?
Yeah, so the school is good at what it does. It helps children getting acquainted with the culture of Poland, customs, transport. The child knows how to use transport, how to buy a train ticket, but I have never traveled using Polish transport. Now I know how to pay for the transport. The child has already told me because she learned how to travel when they use public transport with class. She knows and shows me. She says, you need to go here, this is here and here. You need to buy a ticket here and you need to put it there. Now I can also use the public transport. I know the train, where it goes, and my child's already comfortable and not afraid when using public transportation.
Wonderful. Anything else to add?
Yeah, my daughter has started the process of successful adaptation to school in Poland. She has a new friend. They visit different places and museums with classmates and teachers. The emotional aspect, in my opinion, is satisfied on the highest level since my daughter continues her education in Poland after the war.
That's great. I'm glad you've had that experience. Thank you for coming in today.
Of course. Thank you, Trace, for that interview that showed that while there are many inequalities in the educational system, many Poles are working together in order to make it the best possible for Ukrainian refugees. And finally, we're going to touch on Poland and the realm of global politics. Globally, Poland is a member of the EU and NATO. Poland has been in the EU since 2004 and has been in NATO since 1999. This allows Poland to work with allied countries in order to help Ukraine against the war. There has been international recognition for Poland's efforts to aid Ukraine during the war. Poland has given military and humanitarian aid to Ukraine. This, however, does result in rising tensions between Poland and Russia and Belarus. Ultimately, this puts a huge target on Poland and makes them very susceptible to attacks from Russia, whether that includes cyber attacks or other forms of attack. It's honestly a very scary thing to think about when considering what could possibly happen in the future, especially if Russia continues to be such a huge and powerful superpower. An important thing to point out is that location-wise, Poland is the best ally for Ukraine to have. Poland's between Western Europe and Ukraine, making Poland the best place for security measures to be created and implemented. So international plans such as NATO defense strategies and other EU strategies are being conducted in Poland because of the accessibility to the Ukraine that the borders allows. Globally, we have seen a lot of cooperation with Western allies, specifically the United States. And in times of crisis like this, it takes a lot of countries coming together to fight for a common goal, which in this case is to protect Ukraine from Russia. Now, Poland may be a small country, but their global presence throughout this war is never going to be forgotten, and it's going to go down in history.
Wiele dziewczat jest na świecie, lecz najwięcej w Ukrainie. Tam me serce pozostało przy kochanej mej dziewczynie. Hej, 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 sokoły, omijajcie góry, lasy, doły. Dzwoń, 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 dzwoneczku, mój stepowy skowroneczku. Hej, 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 sokoły, omijajcie góry, lasy, doły. Dzwoń, 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 dzwoneczku, mój stepowy, dzwoń, dzwoń, dzwoń. Żal, żal za dziewczyną, za zieloną Ukrainą. Żal, żal, serce płacze, już się więcej nie zobaczę. Hej,